That's great. Now, one last question. Where are you eating tonight?
Oh, well, now I actually ate, and you're gonna laugh at.
Hi, and welcome to the Vino Karma Show. I'm Amanda Layden, the founder and CEO of Vino Karma. As you know, here at Vino Karma, we love to talk to interesting people, people who are out there creating change in the world, particularly in the beverage and food industries, and doing incredible things. And so today we have one of my favorite people, Lauren Abda, who is the founder and CEO of Branchfood, the largest community of food entrepreneurs and startups in New England, and the co-founder at Branch Venture Group, an angel network for investment in early stage food startups. And prior to Branch Food, Lauren has done a bunch of cool things, including consulting for food tech businesses in Boston and San Francisco, working for an analyst at Salt Venture Partners LLC, a venture capital firm focused on food startups. She also has a master's in food policy and applied nutrition from the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition and Policy. And I could go on with many, many other things. She is also a fellow foodie. And so I'm really excited to have Lauren here with us today. Lauren, welcome to Vino Karma.
Thank you very much for having me, Amanda. It's a pleasure to be here and excited to discuss all food things with you.
Me too. So, for those folks who don't know who you are, can you share a little bit about what you do at Branch Food?
Absolutely. So at Branchfood, we mainly focus on providing resources for food entrepreneurs and food businesses that seek to have a greater change or seek to affect a greater change in the food industry, making it one that contributes to better health outcomes, sustainability, and a better environment. And so over the course of the last 6 years that I've been running Branch Food and now as well Branch Venture Group, we've mainly focused on building products to help enable those businesses and entrepreneurs to realize their goals. We also have a capital network, Branch Venture Group, that seeks to make investments in emerging companies. And all of this really started from a very personal family experience. So when I was 16 years old, my grandmother was diagnosed with leukemia, and my mom worked at the hospital at the time. She kind of knew that someone with that diagnosis was did not have a very positive outlook in the months ahead. And so she actually quit her job and moved to California to learn how to treat disease with plant-based diets, and spent about a month in Southern California with a doctor out there who focused on the kind of acid alkaline diet and the importance of maintaining that type of balance for our own kind of homeostasis. And she came back to, where we were in Pennsylvania and changed all of our diets. Like no longer were we eating, meat and cheese and starches. We were having salads followed by green juice, followed by, green smoothies for dessert. And it came at a really impactful time for me. I was deciding what I wanted to study in college and looking at programs, and decided to pursue a food science undergraduate degree at the University of Vermont, which we could certainly get into later, but it was a really transformative life experience that I found really mirrors a lot of others who want to get involved in the food industry and have had some sort of, health-oriented life experience that really inspires them to affect change.
I think it's really important, and it's really important to share your story, because sometimes as entrepreneurs, people don't understand that the thing that you're doing in the world to make money is also your passion and your why, and the reason why you get out of bed every single day to make the impact you're making in an industry that so desperately needs some change across the entire value chain and across the entire supply chain. And so, kudos to you for, I think, having some type of kind of presence of mind, even at a young age, to say, this is something that I could potentially do for my career. And I'm seeing the effects that it's having right here in my home at my dinner table in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And, I know having been to Scranton and also coming from the Midwest, oftentimes you don't have access to the healthiest food. So also kudos to your mom, or at least I didn't growing up. And so kudos to your mom for also recognizing that and being able to provide something to your family. So I appreciate the story. And I think there's so many parts of that we could talk about today, as well as, when we think about, you were saying, your work, particularly with the change in the food system, with sustainability. Can you talk a little bit more about the types of organizations you work with, and at what stage you at Branch Venture Group start to invest in them and the impact they're making?
Great question. So at Branch Venture Group, which is where I spend the majority of my time these days, we focus primarily on three sectors within the food industry that are undergoing rapid change due to new startup development. So first is consumer packaged goods. We're very interested in businesses that have a strong food science foundation. You may be familiar with Beyond Meat, Impossible Burger, Kite Hill, businesses that are really doing something unique in terms of the products that they're bringing to market at the product and development level. We also look at food tech, which for us, we define as digital content and media for food, e-commerce marketplace platforms, hospitality technology, supply chain technology, and really any type of tech that's sort of coming in to the supply chain of food for its improvement. And then for us, we also look at agriculture-related technology, which is sensors, drones, robotics, and other types of manufacturing technology, as well as life sciences for food. And so being based in the greater Boston area, we see a lot of new business development, particularly in technology, manufacturing, life sciences, healthcare, started by entrepreneurs that have those industry backgrounds and have that knowledge and expertise, but actually see a lot of opportunity for applying that to the food industry. And so we spend a lot of our time working with those types of businesses to really see if they're a good fit for investment. Related to the investment and what we look at for Branch Venture Group. So if you're in one of those three categories, great, we want to talk to you. But then within that, we look very early on in a life cycle of a company for investment. So we're looking primarily at the pre-seed, seed, and some Series A funding round opportunities to invest in those types of companies. We look primarily in North America for businesses with a preference for US-based and founded startups. We seek to, I would say do 4 to 5 new investments per year, as well as follow on with our existing portfolio companies, of which to date we have 14. For a lot of companies that are coming to Branch Venture Group, they're raising anywhere from, I would say, $500,000 to $3 million as their first formal round of funding. And so, we look to be a strategic investment group alongside of other investors that are investing in those businesses as well, really bringing food industry knowledge, expertise, as well as capital to support those founders and their goals. And I think in terms of, what we're looking for just in general from those businesses, certainly a return on our investment, first and foremost. This is a, return on investment endeavor. So, we always seek to be aligned with the entrepreneurs in that way. We meet a lot of entrepreneurs that, have, would call them more lifestyle businesses that could certainly generate a return for investors, but don't have that, 5 to 7 year time horizon where they're really looking to exit the business or get acquired, or, maybe even IPO, which is a little less common in the food industry these days. I think founders that have a strong origin story are always very interesting to us, particularly ones in consumer products. You need to have that mission, that authenticity, that founder that's, almost embodies the brand today. And we look for founders that kind of have those aspects and have, that strong story associated with the founding of their company. I think for our investors as well, they really look to resonate with the brand in some way, whether it be through taste or through, mission or some sort of health benefit, environmental impact. Angel investment tends to be not only a return on investment endeavor, but also one that can speak to people. And I think that that's what we're seeing through a lot of the investments that have been made. If you look at our portfolio to date, all of those businesses have a really interesting environmental, sustainability, or health-oriented impact. So yeah, that in addition to traction, ability to scale, strong gross margins, strong founding team are all aspects that we consider when looking for an investment in a food-related company, and have been really excited about what we've seen. There's no shortage of exciting deal flow in food and beverage and food tech and ag tech these days. And so we're excited to be doing this work.
That must be really exciting to see the types of companies that are coming across your desk frequently, and that you really get to look at and see what amazing things folks are doing. In that vein, the food industry and the beverage industries have changed quite a bit over the past decade, even couple of years, with the pace of change and transformation that's happened in the past 18 or so months. What have you seen, and what trends are you seeing with the market?
Yeah, so I think back to when this change really started taking place, and what I have been hearing myself say, or just thinking a lot about, I guess, recently is, really influential media pieces, quite frankly. Media is incredibly powerful in the food industry. And so, of course, with the onset of social media and, the ability of, kind of influencers and individuals to really capture an audience, I think that certainly had something to do with the perpetuation of it. But I think originally, Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma, Forks Over Knives, the documentaries that really revealed a lot of the issues and the not so pretty parts of the food industry, I think were really influential in terms of, people asking, like, what is in my food? What does free range mean? What am I eating? What is sodium benzoate? And, really challenging the industry, which I think at the time didn't necessarily have their feet underneath them in terms of what they were going to say that consumers would be assuaged by. And so it really was that. And I think that was, 10, 12 years ago now. And so what we've just seen are so many people that, again, have had these sort of personal health experiences, or, have this particular skill set that's inspired them to get involved in the industry to create a better one. I think also inspired by so many businesses and brands that have been particularly successful in this industry too, right? You look at RX Bar's exit for $600 million. You look at that. I mean, that's an amazing exit for an early, what once was an early stage food product brand. That's, a successful software exit. It wasn't until I think we started seeing the successes of some of these companies that really inspired a lot of people and really launched 1,000 ships. So as I think back to, what was really the driver of this change that, we're just totally in the midst of now, I think it really was the media that was particularly influential. Regarding, consumer trends and what's happening now, I mean, there's so much happening. I think one of the things that we're really excited about at Branch Venture Group is actually personalized nutrition. There has been a trend in food for a long time, which has been, customization, personalization, building diets, building menus, building plans, custom to, your personalized DNA, your, individual health needs, your activity schedule. And so over the course of the last 3 years, particularly, we've seen a number of businesses working both on the research, kind of underpinning that with, things coming out like the gut microbiome research that a number of startups are working on now, to personalized meal kits like Habit, which unfortunately no longer exists, was sort of a spin out of Campbell's Soup. But the inklings of the ability to create a diet personalized to you is really coming in with new startup activity. And so we're really excited about that. I think that personalized nutrition still has a long way to go, though. A lot of the research just isn't there to really validate the marketing claims that some of these companies are making. And it's still a really, nutrition as a science and as a, kind of practice is still very new. I mean, food science is my background, but food policy and nutrition was what I went and got my master's degree in. And, as we think back to the origins of food science, that's, only about 70, 80 years ago that the first vitamins came to market. We really started to learn about micronutrient deficiencies like scurvy. And so I think we have a long way to go in just realizing, is coconut oil, is it good for us? We still don't know. Is intermittent fasting good for us? We still don't know. We don't have a lot of longitudinal data on the impact of those types of dietary choices or activity related choices. And so there's still a lot to be done, but I'm excited that more investment is going into this space and therefore more research is coming out in support of how we, can best feed ourselves.
Yeah, it's really fascinating when you think about the research as it blends into what comes to market and also what the consumer is hearing and what they believe. That I think is something interesting too, that we can dig into in a minute. So I'm going to ask you, just a really tiny question now, which is, how can we feed the world in more healthy, equitable, and sustainable ways? Just a small question.
It's such a big question. Well, I think in some ways we are making progress, right? Because in so many of the conversations that I've been having these days with entrepreneurs, but also big companies that, are gearing up for feeding 10 billion people on this planet, which we are expected to be, very shortly in just a few decades. And so, the urgency of having to create a food system that does not completely decimate our environment is certainly forefront in a lot of startups and a lot of entrepreneurs and big companies' minds, right? Because if there's one way to feed 10 billion people, it's through the channels that big food has already built. And big food will make the food that consumers want. And so I think that consumers, if there's one thing I'd like them to realize through all of this is that, the foods that they do choose to eat impact the system that is in place. And if they want to change the system, they can do so by buying foods that are better for the environment, are contributing to a more sustainable world and system, do produce better health outcomes. And so, I think that there's a lot of specific guidance on what those types of foods are. I think there's a lot of general guidance on what those types of foods are. It's mostly plants. We've seen a lot of new developments on the plant-based protein front, particularly. It's consuming beverages and foods that aren't so sugary. It's, keeping your fat intake and keeping your terrestrial animal intake to a minimum. And so I think that the knowledge is there. I think that people get a little tripped up when they start thinking about, should I eat this? Should I eat that? Is, this good for me? Is that good for me? I think that those are valid questions, but I think just the general guidance of eating mostly plants, less meat, is, kind of good enough for contributing to a system that we hope is in place in the future. So yeah, I'm encouraged by the fact that, this is a very forefront topic for a lot of entrepreneurs and startups. But I still think we have a long way to go in terms of being able to meet the demands that will be here in just a couple of decades. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think there's just so much to navigate. And I think, I put my consumer hat on and think, what can I do and what should I know and how do I navigate this? And if I'm in middle America or rural America, how do I educate myself, or what do I do basically? And, here at Vino Karma, I think, our tagline is changing the world one sip at a time. And I think each of us can take a little sip. And part of that could be just what some of the marketing does out there, which is Meatless Monday, or, some of the basic things that each of us can take responsibility for, and we haven't even talked about sustainability in fishing, or what that means to our ocean, or the plastic waste that we all have, the bottles and everything that we're creating. all of the food packaging, when you think about it, food and beverage packaging, what that's doing to our environment as a whole, and not even about the gases and the emissions and everything else. So I think that's something that, that's probably a topic in and of itself in terms of how each of us can take accountability to push the system to create the change we want to see.
Yeah. Well, I think, to touch on one example that you just shared, single-use plastic is ending up in our oceans. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Watching Seaspiracy was totally traumatizing for me. I don't know if you saw that, but yeah, it's just, despite the fact that it's easy to purchase things that come in single-use packaging, making a conscious effort to bring a water bottle or purchasing more things in bulk, finding those kind of small ways to, really embrace the values that you may have around sustainability, environmental impact, better health outcomes, I think create a wave. And I think as more consumers choose to do that, which I think they are, the industry will adapt and will change. And I think we're seeing that. It's not like it's not happening, right? There's been whole grocery stores dedicated to selling only bulk items. Straws are now being made in many cases from agave fibers and paper and more sustainable packaging options. So change is underway. It takes time, but I'm encouraged to see businesses and in many cases startups leading the way.
That is exciting. So I want to talk about something else as it pertains to consumers. In America, as we're both sitting in America, we have, what I would call almost a watershed moment in America last May when George Floyd was murdered and people took to the streets to protest the injustices that we see here. And that also started playing out in terms of brands and how brands, what stance they take in certain areas and arenas. And, now consumers have this growing buying power with this, what we call cancel culture, which I totally disagree with. But anyway, we have it. It exists. And so what do you think, and I'm using George Floyd as an example in terms of some brands stepped out and got it right. Some brands got it wrong. Some brands said nothing. And so what do you think, the responsibility is on the brand side in terms of, when things are happening that affect certain communities in terms of making sure their brand represents their values? And also, what do you think consumers need to be thinking about with the brands they support?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to answer that question. I think I want to tackle the George Floyd Black Lives Matter movement first, because I actually think this was a remarkable point in time, not only for our country, but for the food industry particularly. George Floyd's death in May of 2020, and I think the emerging Black Lives Matter movement after that, and the plight of marginalized communities, really being revealed in a big way, brought long overdue enlightenment to the crucial role that these communities play and individuals play in the food industry, right? I mean, at its core, the food industry is a very labor-intensive industry. And whether we're talking about farmers in the South, cooks in city restaurants, workers in meat processing facilities, delivery personnel bringing you your takeout, it is often those communities that serve those roles and have those positions. And so I think that the Black Lives Matter movement did our entire country and hopefully the world the justice of raising awareness about these communities being the backbone of our society and keeping our society going amidst a global pandemic. And so I'd like to think that is recognized and hopefully greater value is placed upon those communities because of the crucial role that they played over the course of that time. As it relates to brands and businesses that, had messaging surrounding that time and in some cases said lots, said little, said something between that was very vague. I think what we saw in food was actually that brands that came out and took a stance of inclusivity and support for the BLM movement actually saw an increase in sales in terms of the products that they were selling in market. Ben & Jerry's was actually one of the ones that was very early in their reaction to what was going on and very much sided with the importance of recognizing this community, the difficulty that they have, and supporting, Black Lives Matter. What we actually saw in the data was that their sales over-indexed the month that Black Lives Matter movement actually started happening, and those protests started happening because they were in support of it, and people, perhaps wanted to support the brand, and that brand really resonated with their beliefs and their interests. Now, I'm sure they lost, folks too because of the stance that they took, but they were, strong enough to come out and actually be in support of it. And I think it was completely to their benefit financially, as well as from a branding perspective. So really encouraged to sort of see that, and hopefully in the future, other brands, if there's any brands listening to this, would love for them to know that, you can take a stance as a company, even as a, public multi-billion-dollar company, and it can really work for you.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is taking a stance, which is authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Ben and Jerry's, they have been a brand that, that's not the first time they've taken a stance on something. And, you see that in their ice cream flavors, in their branding, in their values, how they treat their employees, where they source, the nuts for their ice cream, whatever it is. So it's something that's authentic to them. For me, when I see things, the consumer's smart now. They know if you're not being authentic to who you are and your values. And it's that, what's the word? There's a word for it now. It's like the fake activism that's happening. You have to stand in what you truly believe in, and not make it up. And if you don't know yet as a company, then start having conversations internally and figuring out what does that mean for us as an organization. At least that's my take on it. So for entrepreneurs entering into this space, whether it be food or beverage, because at Branch Venture Group, you also invest in beverage companies, and at Branchfood, you also support beverage organizations there as well. What should entrepreneurs be thinking about as they step into this space?
So I think, first of all, they need to be realistic about what their goals and aspirations are, and why they're really getting into it. It's a hard industry. There's a lot of other things that you can do in your life that will give you more money faster. Starting a food-related or beverage-related product company is not in the top 10. But I think, to our discussion earlier around the motivation for getting involved in this industry, and with that being, with that coming from so many people that have very personal health experiences, they're very mission driven. And while, yes, they may want to, exit their company in 5 to 7 years after they've started the brand and scaled it up and, really refined their target market and their messaging and their branding. And that, seems to be a value to a large corporate company that's looking to acquire something in that category. I still think so many of the entrepreneurs that actually end up getting it to that point are, to your point, very authentic, very embody the brand that they're bringing to market, and, are as enthusiastic about running a business and knowing their financials and knowing their numbers and knowing their unit economics and knowing what they really want to build and what they're building towards. And so I would say having clarity around what that vision is, where you're going, how you're going to get there, is something I would encourage every entrepreneur to have an honest conversation with themselves about, because once you know that, then you can surround yourself with the team to get you there, right? You can find the investors that believe in your mission. You can find, the lawyers and accountants and bankers and marketers and branding agencies and, everyone that can help get you there. But you have to know where you want to go and be honest with yourself about that, and honest with the people around you that in many cases really just want to help.
I'm going to now ask you some fun questions.
Ooh, awesome. These have been fun. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, these are fun, but I'm going to ask some Lauren fun questions. Okay. What is your favorite food smell scent?
Ooh, I think garlic and white wine.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's a good one. That's a great one.
It's delicious. a bit of background. I used to live in the North End of Boston, which is traditionally the Italian section. And so walking through the streets of the North End around dinner time, you get a lot of that, smell. And it's just, yeah, it hits you in a way that just makes you instantly hungry.
Yeah, and definitely you don't want to be walking around those streets hungry.
You do not.
What is one of the favorite meals you've ever had?
Oh, that's a good question. I come from a Lebanese family, and it's my dad's side of the family that's the Lebanese, and we would always share big Lebanese feast on Christmas Eve. We celebrated Christmas growing up, and my grandmother would make kusa, which is basically zucchini stuffed with minced beef and tomato sauce. And it was just so heartwarming. And I think it was just made with so much love that it just stands out as one of those, dishes of my life that I'll hopefully have every Christmas from here on out, one way or another. But yeah.
Favorite food city right now?
Ooh, probably Washington, D.C., which is where I'm tuning in from. D.C. has an amazingly diverse food scene, and I love food from all over the world. It's one of my favorite pastimes, is just trying out all the crazy things that I've never heard of. And so exploring DC has been really delicious.
One food you can't live without?
Chocolate.
Does wine count as a food?
If you asked beverage, I would say wine.
Are there any up and coming brands, food entrepreneurs, beverage entrepreneurs, or products you're really excited about that folks should go out and check out now?
Ooh, good question. I hate to choose one of our Branch Venture Group portfolio companies because I think of them all as exceptional, but I think that if I had to choose one, I really love what Willie's Super Brew is doing. So Willie's Super Brew is a Boston-founded beverage company. They're in the low alcohol space, and they're creating low alcohol beverages that are full flavor and made with real ingredients. So, whereas Truly and White Claw and Spiked Seltzer have, come onto the scene and garnered a lot of consumer interest, those products are, made with flavors and chemicals and things that I'd prefer to not put in my body. Willie's Super Brew is a wonderful alternative to those things, made with real ginger, real lemon, real pomegranates, real blueberries. They have a brand new flavor out, grapefruit lime. So yeah, I'm fascinated by the movement away from beer and the new market that's emerging, which is these kind of progressive adult beverages, as we've been referring to them at Branch Venture Group, and the market share that those companies are able to acquire these days is truly remarkable. And so highly recommend trying Willie's Super Brew. You can get it in New England, soon to be hopefully up and down the East Coast. And yeah, if you ever meet one of their team members, tell them Lauren said hi.
I have tried them, of course, and they are extremely delicious. And so I appreciate you giving a shout out to them because they deserve the support. They're doing some fantastic things. Is there anything else that I should have asked you that I haven't yet, whether it relates to the food system as a whole, to consumers, to entrepreneurs coming into the space? Anything you would like to share with our community that you really feel they need to hear or to know?
Well, I think, it's an exciting time to be in the food industry, no matter what you're doing. If you're looking for a career change, if you're looking to take your skill set and apply it to a space that's, under rapid change and development, getting involved and working with a company that has an impact that really resonates with you is really possible in food today. And so I think for any of the folks on the call that, may have the inklings of a new business idea, are working with a team currently, have a side hustle, I would say check out Branchfood. We want to work with you. We want to support your efforts. And when it comes time for you to raise money and get support for your business from a financial perspective, reach out to Branch Venture Group. We'd love to know what you're doing, and we'd love to support you in your goals.
That's great. And how else and where can folks go to check out what you're up to and possibly attend some of your upcoming events? Can you share with folks what you have going on that they can check out?
Sure. So you can learn more about all of our work at branchfood.com and branchventuregroup.com. We have some really exciting events upcoming over the course of the next couple of months and for the remainder of this year, related to community development and networking and supporting people in their connectivity goals as they realize their businesses and what they're bringing to market. So definitely tune in. We have a monthly community table event, which happens from noon to 1 on the first Thursday of every month. It's free, open to the public, and virtual. So you can tune in from wherever you're at, share more about what you're working on, ask questions, and get support for what you need. And then beyond that, we have a membership organization as well as part of Branch Venture Group. And to the extent that you're serious, looking to connect with mentors, advisors, investors, consider joining Branchfood as a member. Again, we'd love to work with you and support you in your efforts.
That's great. Now, one last question. Where are you eating tonight?
Oh, well, now I actually ate, and you're going to laugh, at Tate.
Oh, you did?
Which is now in DC, but is a Boston-founded company. Yeah, you could take the girl out of Boston, but you can't take Boston out of the girl, I suppose. Just so happens this is very close to where I'm tuning in from. And so Tate was dinner tonight, and really apropos for this conversation.
Very apropos. I mean, I ate there far too often, and normally it was their almond croissant, which is not the healthiest thing in the world, but one of the most delicious things in the world. Oh, and they have a good shakshuka if you have breakfast. But anyway, and anybody in Boston and now DC, go check them out. Just a little plug. They don't know we're doing that. But I just want to say, thank you, Lauren, for taking the time. I know it's kind of late where you are. It's still not quite dinner time where I am. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and also talk to our community. And what we say here at Vino Karma is please continue to go out there and create change one sip at a time. Cheers. Hi, I'm Amanda Layden, the founder of the Vino Karma Project. I'm going to chat briefly to Steve Pollack, Dr. Pillay. Without further ado, Irene Bright. Welcome to the Vino Karma Project, Professor Kendi.
What I like about the Vino Karma events in general is the combination of community, of connecting with people in the room, as well as thinking of how you can connect outside the room.
We also create a safe space to have courageous conversations and sometimes uncomfortable conversations that move us to action.
We're in a time in which some have estimated that demonstrations that have swept this country and have been sweeping this country for months is the largest anti-racist mobilization in American history.
So for the change to continue, we need to continue to support the Black winemakers whose wines we're tasting tonight and Professor Kendi's work. You're an amazing human being, and we thank you for your work.
Thank you for formulating this community, and I'm just so happy I was able to be a part of it one night.